Carla, you're going to tell me when to share my screen, right? You're sharing something else first?
I'll share the welcome slide, and then Rachel will do introductions, and then you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, I would like to welcome everyone. And I am Rachel McKenzie. I am the managing attorney at the Pro Bono Project of Silicon Valley. And I am this year's chair of our Santa Clara County Domestic Violence Conference. And it is my honor to be here in this capacity. And I want to thank the Santa Clara County Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention, because without them, this conference would absolutely not have been possible. Please look up our upcoming webinars throughout the remainder of the month of October, including our 3-day Strangulation Institute next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, with the amazing folks from the Alliance of Hope, including Casey Gwynn, Gail Strack, and Chan Hellman, again next week. Next Friday, we are also offering another webinar that is LGBTQ based. And you can find all of this information along with CLE and CEU information for the strangulation program and other written materials, of course, at the Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention's website, sccandviolence.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce session 7, a collaborative intersectional approach to gender-based violence. And our panelists include Perla P. Flores. And Perla has worked on issues of gender-based violence since 2003. In her current role as division director, Ms. Flores oversees domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking programs at Community Solutions, a nonprofit human agency service in South Santa Clara County and San Benito County. She's a founding member and current chair of the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking. Ms. Flores co-authored the Human Trafficking Advocate Manual, a resource guide for domestic violence and sexual assault advocates working with human trafficking survivors, and has developed several guidelines and promising practices on human trafficking crisis intervention and case management. Ms. Flores is a commissioner on the Santa Clara County Domestic Violence Council and an alternative commissioner on the Santa Clara Human Trafficking Commission. She's also a member of the Santa Clara County CEDWA Task Force and holds a master's degree in public administration and a Juris Doctor. She is the recipient of the 2010 California Peace Prize, the 2015 Santa Clara County Domestic Violence Council Outstanding Advocate Award. We're also joined by Vishal Bandita. Vishal is a deputy district attorney at the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. He's been a prosecutor for 18 years and has prosecuted a range of cases from domestic violence to child sexual assaults. He's currently assigned as the supervising deputy district attorney for South County branch in Morgan Hill. And we are also joined by Detective Mindy Sen. Mindy's began her career in law enforcement 22 years ago as a reserve police officer with the Arroyo Grande Police Department and was employed by the Morgan Hill Police Department as a police officer in 1997. She holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice management. Throughout her career, she has served as a patrol officer, resource school officer, street crimes detective, domestic violence and missing persons detective, hostage negotiator, field training officer, explorer advisor, taser instructor, bike patrol instructor, and peer support coordinator. During her role as a domestic violence detective, she investigated domestic violence cases for both the Gilroy and Morgan Hill Police Departments. She was instrumental in the development of the South County Family Justice Center located in Morgan Hill. All of these bios, along with many others, are on the same website I mentioned earlier, sccendviolence.org. I would like to move on to our learning objectives for today. Participants will have an increased understanding of the different intersections of gender-based violence, of the roles that advocates, law enforcement, and prosecutors play, and of partnership levels, including communication, cooperation, coordination, and collaboration. I do want to remind everyone to please submit their questions in the Q&A section and the panelists will address them. And with that, it is my true honor to turn this program over to our learned panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I also want to introduce, I'm super excited to be here today with all of my colleagues. I want to introduce Karen Schultz. She's a founder and managing attorney for the Step Forward Foundation, a nonprofit organization that supports survivors of gender-based violence, primarily in South County and San Benito County. And Karen has been providing support to survivors of gender-based violence for many years now, through immigration law, family law, as well as employment law, and whatever else is necessary or needed. Karen's also the co-chair of the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking's Legal Services Committee. And with us today is also Ingrid Infante, an amazing legal advocate for community solutions. Ingrid had been supporting survivors of domestic violence through the restraining order process, advocacy process for many, many years. It has also been the recipient of the Advocate of the Year Award, and just an amazing colleague. So thank you all for being here today and for being part of this presentation, and to all of the attendees. So what we're hoping today that you will get out of our presentation and intersectional collaborative approach to gender-based violence is an increased awareness of the local family justice centers in Santa Clara County. We're very fortunate to have 3. Also an increased understanding of the Family Justice Center individual and collective partner roles, and an increased understanding of our intersectional collaborative approach to gender-based violence. And this is the logo for the South County Family Justice Center. As was mentioned previously, Mindy Sen was instrumental in implementing the South County Family Justice Center, and also in co-authoring with me and other partners a Family Justice Center manual that explains the roles of partners and in terms of operations and programmatic support. And this is a logo that we've developed for our Family Justice Center in South County. So the vision of the South County Family Justice Center is to transform the community by breaking the cycle of family violence in this generation, restoring hope to individuals, their families, and the community. And we also developed this mission statement. Our purpose is really to ensure the safety, healing, and self-empowerment of victims and survivors of domestic violence and their children. We advocate for and construct a future where there is zero tolerance for all forms of family violence in South Santa Clara County. And the South Santa Clara County Family Justice Center also provides support to survivors of human trafficking and sexual assault. So to share a little bit about our comprehensive approach to gender-based violence, these are the different components that really build our program and approach. And a big part of it is comprehensive services. So this includes intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking survivor crisis response, confidential advocacy. We have a victim witness support also at the FJC, immigration and family law services provided by Step Forward. We have our law enforcement partners, including the Morgan Hill Police Department, Gilroy Police Department, Sheriff's Office, of course, the District Attorney's Office. And we also offer joint safety planning for high lethality cases, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. Survivors that come into the Family Justice Center are also connected with ongoing case management support, housing, et cetera, depending on their needs. And our service values are to be trauma-informed, survivor-centered, empowerment-based, and also culturally responsive to the needs of our South County clients. Our FJC is also collaborative on several training and technical assistance projects. We provide training to other FJCs across the county. We've developed different protocols, including the manual for the Family Justice Center, joint safety planning for high lethality cases as well. And we've also do a lot of collaborative community outreach, including webinars like these, as well as in-person trainings, when we used to do in-person trainings for community members and professionals. And the other piece that's super important is the collaborative partnerships. And this include our community-based organizations, the law enforcement agencies, Department of Family Children Services, medical providers. So all of these pieces come together so that hopefully we can achieve this intended collective impact, with increased safety for survivors, increased understanding of systems and survivor rights for survivors, also increased access to systems and other resources, increased emotional and physical well-being, streamlining of support, and more responsive systems. So with that, we're going to spend some time really getting to know from all of our amazing partners what their individual roles are and how they contribute as individuals and professionals on behalf of their organizations towards the Family Justice Center in South County. And we're going to start with Ingrid, that's going to share with us about the role of the advocate and the role that Community Solutions plays in this endeavor. Ingrid.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ingrid. So for Community Solutions, we provide confidential domestic violence advocates and support staff during our South County Family Justice Center Day. We host the Family Justice Center on Wednesdays. Prior to COVID, we had an average about 25 walk-ins per day. As of right now, we are currently seeing about 14 walk-ins per day. Our advocates provide confidential crisis intervention, assessment, and triaging for all FJC walk-ins. All of the advocates are bound by Community Solutions policies and procedures. When a survivor walks into the FJC, they are greeted by a Community Solutions confidential advocate, and they are handed the FJC consent for services forms. And they are also given the notice of rights of confidentiality, a Marcy's card, and a criminal case cheat sheet. Once the survivor has completed the forms, the advocate will meet with the survivor in private to answer any concerns, questions, and assess the survivor's needs. It's very common for survivors to come into the FJC and want to speak to a certain partner. For example, they're here to speak to family law or immigration attorneys. Once we are assessing the situation, we find out that the abuser is facing a criminal case. So we also offer them to speak to the DA or to an advocate from the Victim Services Unit. So once we determine or the client discloses which partner they want to speak to, we will offer accompaniment to that interview with that partner. Once that interview has been concluded, the advocate will connect them with the next partner. And again, it's very common for survivors to meet with multiple partners when they come to the Family Justice Center. Once the survivor has met with the partner, the advocate will debrief to confirm that all of the survivor's needs were met. We provide service referrals and resources as needed for survivors. And then at this point, we will offer follow-up services, which includes individualized danger assessment, safety planning, peer counseling, case management, assistance with restraining orders, court accompaniment, therapy, and emergency shelter. All of our follow-up services are offered in English and in Spanish as required by the survivor. Roughly about 38% of our domestic violence clients come through our Family Justice Center on Wednesdays. Additionally, our agency, Community Solutions, will provide an office space and internet access for our participating partners. We'll provide a room where survivors can meet with the partners. We provide a meeting room for our monthly domestic violence support team meeting with the Family Justice Center partners. And lastly, we also maintain a database with statistics for all individuals served by the South County Family Justice Center.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. And Vishal is going to share a little bit about the role of the Santa Clara County DA's office, which was also instrumental in launching the Family Justice Center, obviously in South County, but also throughout the rest of the county.
Thank you, Perla. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here, everyone. The Santa Clara County DA's office acts as the lead county agency with respect to the operation of the Family Justice Center. We staff the FJCs with a domestic violence prosecutor who's available to meet with the survivors or their family members. And I can't stress how valuable this relationship is. It's important to have our trial attorneys at the FJC to meet with the survivors. The trust, the confidence, and the rapport that is built there ultimately leads to more successful outcomes in our prosecutions. To give you an example, DV crimes are they're just different. The offender is not a stranger. The offender is someone that the survivor has an emotional attachment to. So the normal expectations that we have of victims of violent crime are often upended. Vindication and restitution are not sought with the same frequency. Instead, what is sought by the survivor, what is their goal, is safety and peace. And their goal and our goal is often in conflict when it comes to the sentencing, right? So what we think should be an appropriate sentence versus what the abuser's is. But that conflict can be managed with this rapport that is built. At that initial meeting, common ground is sought. It's easy to find in these cases because everyone agrees and everyone wants to make sure that any plea bargain or sentence is aimed at making sure this never happens again. And so when that meeting is earnest, in empathy and devoid of judgment, survivor is much more likely to cooperate with the prosecution, even when the opinions on the ultimate sentencing differ. And that lack of judgment has to be learned and practiced by all of us as practitioners. There's a temptation in society to blame the survivor for being uncooperative or for not leaving a relationship. And we all have to constantly shift our mindset from why are survivors uncooperative? That shouldn't be the question. The question should be, why do abusers batter? And by listening to the survivor's perspective, exploring the mutual interest, and clarifying the roles that everyone has, the district attorney, the survivor, the police, the judicial system, we can find common ground that leads to more successful prosecutions. The district attorney's office also provides on-site access to information related to criminal cases. So we share this information with our partners as long as it's permitted by law, regulations involving CJIC and our internal district attorney's policies. The district attorney's office also staffs the FJC with a victim witness advocate. That is a non-confidential advocate. So the distinction is if a survivor says something to Ingrid in confidence, that information is not shared with the district attorney's office. But if a survivor shares something with the victim witness advocate, that information is part of our file, and when legally appropriate, it is turned over to the defendant's attorneys. Those advocates screen for service eligibility. All state mandated services are provided by that victim witness advocate or that victim advocate. We also provide training and support to all of the partners a couple of times a year. We train new advocates through Community Solutions in regards to the judicial system and the court system. And finally, in order to ensure that survivors know how to access these resources, the district attorney's office is responsible to provide the marketing materials, including brochures, posters, and videos.
Welcome. Come on in. How can I help you? I'm a survivor myself. It was really tough for me to navigate the system and for me to go from one place to another to try to get all of my needs met.
In order to break a cycle of violence, victims need to be prepared more than just emotionally to leave an abusive relationship. There are barriers in place. There are financial barriers. There are housing barriers. There are legal barriers ranging from family law and custody orders to immigration. And victims, if they have to walk through a separate door to receive each one of those services and supports, it's a barrier that's difficult for them to overcome.
The Family Justice Center is a help center for domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims. Each of our Family Justice Center locations, we have them staffed with a district attorney, a family law attorney, an immigration attorney, and victim advocates.
What the Family Justice Center does is it brings all of those resources to that victim, for that victim, under one roof, so that those passive barriers of walking through multiple doors to get help is reduced to just one door.
At our FJC, we integrate the Victim Needs Services Screening Tool. That is a screening tool used for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. We use that in order to help them and direct them to the specific needs that's available to them.
All of the services are triaged by a confidential advocate. So the individual can speak with an advocate first if they have any concerns of any kind. And that we really are working in partnership to provide comprehensive support that's confidential, that's free, that's culturally responsive to our community.
As a DA who has experience going to court and trying cases and now supervising a unit, this is just a really concrete way and a really immediate way to help somebody in need.
Thank you very much, Vishal, for all of your support to survivors and all the work that you do. And now we're going to have Karen from Step Forward Foundation share with us the legal resources and support that are available free of charge to survivors of gender-based violence through the South County Family Justice Center.
Hello, I am the Executive Director of Step Forward Foundation. We're currently located in Morgan Hill inside of the Community Solutions office in Morgan Hill, but we are actually partnered with both the South County Family Justice Center as well as the North County Family Justice Center. So what we did pre-COVID is we were an on-site partner, which means that our attorneys would be available on site on the days of the Family Justice Center in Morgan Hill that being Wednesdays, and in North County and Sunnyvale, that would be on a Friday. In South County, we provide a family law attorney and an immigration attorney that are available to take consultations. On Fridays, we would provide only the immigration, and there would be volunteers to provide family law consultations there. So private attorneys from the local community would volunteer their time to provide these consultations. Right now, because of COVID, we are working remotely, but we are still dedicated to providing these consultations. My team is now entirely remote, but we have created a system where people can submit their questionnaires to us online, and our administrator has become somewhat of an operator, and she will distribute these questionnaires to the appropriate attorney, and we give them a call back as soon as we can. And for those individuals who have walked into the site, particularly in Morgan Hill, we prioritize the people who have come in person for a callback to make sure that they're not waiting at the site for us longer than they need to be. So we do make sure that those people are able to access all of the partners, including us. So what we do, what a consultation is we have the attorney provide a one-on-one consultation with the survivor. We provide the legal advice. Often what this entails is reviewing documents and orders from a prior hearing, particularly in family law. Often somebody who's not represented doesn't necessarily understand what has transpired. And so we do have a system where we are remote, where we have an admin on site who is able to scan documents, even though the attorneys are remote. So they're still able to go through this process with the survivor to make sure they understand what has happened in their case already, which then of course leads them to assess what the next steps might be, what the process is going to look like going forward, and what their options are. In terms of immigration, we will try to assess if there is any prior immigration history, and then also discuss options with them. The good news, bad news is that being a victim of a crime will often open up additional possibilities for immigration relief. And so our immigration attorneys are especially versed in understanding what those options may be. And we can also take on full representation of these people. We do have funding to do that, but it's not guaranteed when somebody comes in to the Family Justice Center, but we will assess them based on urgency, availability of options, and so on. If we cannot take on representation, if we cannot take them on as a client, we ensure that they have proper referrals to other agencies, or we refer them to the referral program with the Santa Clara County Bar Association. But we also can sometimes provide what's called a brief service, which is assisting them to fill out a form that they're going to file themselves. Sometimes this includes getting the records that they don't have so that we can explain them and we can go over them together, and making sure that they're understanding that process and they get the forms that they need in order to get the documents that they need. And just to share quickly how many consultations we have been seeing, even with remote consultations in the month of September, we provided 57 consultations with an average of 11 to 12 per day. This is both for family and immigration. We had 28 consultations for family law, 20 for immigration, and 6 who came for both. 44 individuals were new, so they were seeking their first consultation with Step Forward, and 22 of them preferred Spanish and 13 preferred English. The rest was a mix of other languages. Often these individuals speak English, but their preference is for a different a different language. And of course, we have a language line in order to do that. So even remote, we're still very busy and ensuring that everybody gets as much help as we can provide because the legal services are a big need.
Thank you, Karen, very much. And next, we have our amazing Corporal Detective Mindy Sen. And one thing that was not on Mindy's bio is that there's actually an award named after Mindy. There's the Mindy Sen Award. So she's a pretty impressive person. So thank you, Mindy, for being here. And if you can share a little bit with us about law enforcement's role in supporting survivors of gender-based violence through the FJC.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm assigned to the Family Justice Center in Morgan Hill once a week. While I'm there, I meet with walk-ins who want to report their domestic violence. Now, I take the reports regardless if it only happened in my jurisdiction, Morgan Hill. Oftentimes we have survivors that come in from out of county, in some cases out of state. If they want to report, I will sit down with them and take that report, and I'll forward it to the appropriate jurisdiction. But I think it's important if they want to talk about it, that we sit down and we meet, and I help them the best way I can within my capacity. I also do lethality assessments with our survivors that come through and want to talk to me. And I really appreciate the lethality assessment form because it allows me to understand the severity and prevalence of violence occurring. And in the same regard, myself and the other partners at the FJC, we can come up with a safety plan on how best to support the survivor throughout this time where we're with them and they're allowing us to help them. After I take reports, I do meet with the DA's office and I present the case to him. Sometimes I will call them at the inception of an investigation to let them know the type of case that we're dealing with so that it's on the DA's office's radar and they're aware of it and that it's coming their way. When there's a high lethality case, I do meet with the DA and let them know the facts of the case. And also, if there's an arrest that's been made, and I think that increased bail needs to at least be considered, I make sure to get a hold of our supervising DA, Michelle, and we will talk about this and connect with the DA that's actually going to be handling the case. I also provide training to law enforcement, community solutions advocates, other advocates, agencies in the county such as ACI, in regards to law enforcement responses to domestic violence, and also training on the lethality assessment form. Did I get everything?
You do a lot more than that. And we'll talk a little bit more. Mindy, if you wouldn't mind sharing, because we're talking about this collaborative approach and how that collaboration is not just multidisciplinary, but also interdisciplinary, and some of the work that you've done with other law enforcement agencies, even in different states, to support survivors of domestic violence, if you want to share a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, thank you for reminding me because we talked about this. So when I help survivors with their cases, sometimes they're happening across county lines or state lines, and having the working trust with these other law enforcement partners or other FJCs and understanding our roles and how to best support our survivor during this particular case. It's just important to reach out and make those connections and really the success stories that come out of that. I have a particular case now where I'm reaching out to another state, and they've had a lot of work on their hands with regard to our same offender. And we have been able to talk and exchange some evidence that has been unbeknownst to them can be used in my case, and they're so helpful. So learning how to work with other partners, law enforcement partners, advocacy agencies in other areas is very important. And the success of an FJC and the partnerships that we have and the work that we do is incumbent on us understanding each other's roles, which I really feel fortunate that our Family Justice Center does. We work well together. We brainstorm on how best to support our folks coming through our Family Justice Centers. I love the work that our advocates do. They're so helpful when we introduce them at the beginning of an investigation, the support they offer. And I find that when I introduce the advocate into my investigation at the earliest possible moment, I find that that survivor will see the entire case through to the end. It's important because it says to how supported they feel and how empowered they feel. And I'm really thankful that our survivors are willing to tell us their short story and share with us some of their most difficult moments, and that we're able to help them through that.
Thank you very much, Mindy. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the individual roles that our amazing partners play at the Family Justice Center. And now we want to talk a little bit about how we bring all of this together and how does that collaboration really come into play. With this collaborative approach to gender-based violence, we've been able to develop several processes that have, as a result, and survivors feel more supported. So the first, we talked about the FJC triage and follow-up process, and Ingrid spoke about that. And not only do survivors do advocates follow up with survivors, but obviously also the legal providers, depending on what the survivor needs, law enforcement, victim witness advocates, the district attorney's office. The other piece that's also super helpful is the survivor follow-up interviews and ensuring an advocate support, because the state law says that survivors of domestic violence have the right to have an advocate present during any follow-up interview with law enforcement, district attorneys, defense attorneys. And that happens organically at the Family Justice Centers because, as Mindy mentioned, the interviews take place at the Family Justice Center. So we could always ensure that we are upholding that right that survivors have to have an advocate present during those interviews. The joint safety planning for high lethality cases of domestic violence, intimate partner violence is really important. And we actually provided a training on this last year at the Domestic Violence Conference. And this is a protocol that allows survivors that are really at high risk of really in danger of being seriously hurt by their partner to choose to participate in a joint safety planning session with other partners from the Family Justice Center. So we don't have these safety planning sessions without the survivor. The survivor's at the center of that, and the survivor gets to choose who he or she wants that to be a part of that process. They might choose to have their advocate there, law enforcement. Sometimes they want to have the attorney there. There's concerns around like family law issues. And I know that Mindy, you recently were a part of a joint safety planning effort with I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that in a high lethality case. Do you want to share a little bit about that recent?
Sure, yes. Thank you. So when we do joint safety planning, it's important for us to understand what exactly is happening with the survivor, the type of abuse, where it's happening, what her lifestyle is, so that we can come up with the safest plan. And we talk about things like when you go to work, park at a safe distance, ask for an escort out. Before, as you're getting in your car, check your surroundings. Or let's say they're taking their children to school and just home. Well, when you get to the school, make sure the school's aware that there's a restraining order in place. Also, let your work know if there's a restraining order in place. Get a picture of the restrained party so that anybody who sees this person knows that they should be alerting law enforcement and also the survivor so that she can best protect herself in that instance. So all safety planning is unique to the situation and the lifestyle. So it's important to come up with the best plan. We talk about safety planning in regards to social media access as well. If you go to the stores or you work out or just your patterns. Let's look at what's going on and how we can best protect them. Also cars. Some people will say, I think I'm being followed because somebody's always there. How would they know? And so I've searched vehicles before for trackers, and we found them. And so they had a reason to be concerned. Also apps on their phones, there can be trackers based on placed on them unbeknownst to the survivor. So it all depends on the dynamics of our survivor and their lifestyle, but the advocate and I will talk about how best to address those factors, and we do it together. And it's really important at the end that the victim realize all the safety plans that we talked about, and we ask them to consider, and then you can see them start to think about, wow, I am at risk, or I never thought about that before. I didn't think that really meant anything. So the safety plan is very important. The legality assessment is a very valuable tool for law enforcement. It has some very specific questions that can start to bring out other things that you may not have focused on. For instance, have they threatened to kill you or someone else? That's an important one because we're going to identify the high lethality of that. It's important for me to try to protect the survivor with a high lethality situation like that from this offender, but also anybody that comes in contact with this offender during apprehension, or he finds out he's potentially violent to the public, to law enforcement as well. So this person is a threat. So the higher the lethality, the more important it is for us to try to get that person and protect our survivor with emergency protective orders, getting the person in custody, asking for a high bail. So safety planning is all based on the uniqueness of that situation and the lethality assessment.
Thank you, Mindy. And the joint safety planning is not just about that initial meeting with the survivor and the different partners, but also the follow-up plan. I know Mindy's been really helpful. There's been cases where we've not able to get a hold of a survivor, and part of the safety plan was, if we can't get a hold of you, we're going to send law enforcement to come and look for you. So Mindy has gone out to survivors' homes, to survivors' employment, to ensure that survivors are safe. The other piece that's really important when we talk about safety planning is the safety of survivors, but also the safety of their family members. And that can include, so for example, we had a situation where a survivor that came to the Family Justice Center is a resident of San Benito, but came in to seek services, since all the comprehensive services that are offered there, and is working with the Step Forward Foundation, working with Karen. And this is a pretty extreme case, but it's also a good example of why it's so important to work so closely together. So this survivor's partner was arrested for domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And her family members are being basically threatened in Mexico. And so Karen, if you can share a little bit about some of the safety planning on your end and the partnerships that you've with law enforcement, the DA's office, HSI, to support the survivor in her immigration process, but also to her parents and family members that are potentially at risk. If you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as it's been mentioned, having these kinds of connections with law enforcement is so critical. In this particular case, I was able to reach out to the victim witness advocate of HSI, which is the Homeland Security division for the investigations. And she is going to see if they can assist us with not only getting the survivor some form of what's called continued presence, because she's currently assisting with an ongoing prosecution, but also to see about trying to bring her parents in, because they are they're in direct danger because of the human trafficking. I mean, this is a very limited thing that our federal government can do for very specific circumstances where the family members are in direct danger as a result of the investigation or because of the human trafficking. But again, those kinds of connections are just so critical to get the partners involved who need to be involved, because even though I can apply for an immigration benefit through the normal process, even if I were able to get that expedited, it would still take months. And when a family member's life is in danger, we don't have months. And I can also say that even the district attorney's office in other cases I've had, even when there isn't a direct danger to somebody outside the country, they have been immensely helpful in getting cases, helping me get them expedited with the federal government, by explaining the role that the survivor is playing in an ongoing investigation or prosecution. And so then that person can feel more secure, not in fear of being deported, which basically that fear just never goes away until they have it in their hand, understandably. And so the district attorney's office has assisted some of my clients with that before, and it's just such a huge relief to get it done, get it approved, and then they can focus on the survivors can focus on the prosecution.
Thank you, Karen. The other piece that we're doing as far as part of a collaborative is this, we're part of the Santa Clara County Intimate Partner Violence Strangulation Exam pilot. And this is a pilot that includes the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, Office of Gender-Based Violence, the SART programs, and San Jose Police Department, Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. Recently, the Gilroy Police Department was brought in as well, and the city of the Santa Clara Police Department. And through this pilot, we're able to provide support to survivors that were strangled by their partner during the assault. And that support includes offering the exam at no cost to the survivor, because sometimes that cost is something that's prohibitive for survivors. And the other piece that's really exciting is being able to offer an advocate that can provide accompaniment to the survivor during that entire process. And that's really helpful to survivors in terms of providing that emotional support. And in addition to responding to strangulation exams that are started by the law enforcement agencies that I mentioned, we're also really fortunate that the county supported that advocates can also initiate that exam. When advocates are working with a survivor that shares that he or she was strangled, then we can also reach out and initiate that exam. And that piece is so important because we looked at our data, we looked at danger assessments that advocates completed in a period of time, 1 year period of time. And we saw that almost 40% of survivors that completed a danger assessment reported that they have been strangled by their partner. And then we looked at police reports, and in the police reports during that same period of time, only 13% of survivors disclosed that they have been strangled by their partner. So what that tells us that survivors are much more likely to disclose to advocates that they were strangled by their partner. So advocates play a very important role in encouraging survivors to have that exam. And Ingrid's going to be sharing with us what that process looks like. And from the advocate's perspective, what is the support that you offer, Ingrid? What is that process like for survivors? If you can share a little bit for us, please.
So when one of the advocates accompanies survivors to a strangulation exam, we meet the survivor at VMC at the SART clinic. At the emergency room. It's very similar to the SART process of the check-in. The strangulation exam is a forensic exam. They take several pictures of any injuries, measurements, things of that sort. Clients do have a lot of questions during this process. Thanks to the strangulation training that we've had, we're able to provide more information on the effects of being strangled, what are the consequences and things to look out for. So over time, that process has gotten better. Initially, because this pilot program is just started this year in January of this year, and it was relatively new. It was taking an average of about 8 to 9 hours to from beginning to end to get the exam done, and that's getting to the emergency room by the time you leave. I would say about 8 to 9 hours. Right now, it is the time that is spent is less. And I think that is, it's improving over time, and it's also thanks to the collaboration within the partners. It seems it's flowing more smoothly. And like Perla said, luckily now we're able to talk about this strangulation exam with clients during during our meetings and with the client. And if they disclose being strangled, we can offer them the exam. And if that's something that they're interested in doing, we can get that process initiated without them having to go through law enforcement.
Thank you, Ingrid. So those are just some examples again of what this collaborative approach can look like. And now I want to talk a little bit about individual cases and how our partners come together to support individual survivors of gender-based violence that come through the FJC. So Ingrid's going to be sharing with us, we have a story of one survivor. We changed her name for confidentiality purposes. And we're going to hear a little bit about Emily's story, and then our partners are going to share what their role would be in supporting Emily.
To everyone around me, I had the perfect life, a beautiful house, wonderful kids, and a great husband. What people didn't know is that my husband cheated on me, then beat, raped, imprisoned, and threatened to kill me for wanting to leave him. I was with my husband for 12 years before he started hurting me. After the first beating, he was somewhat remorseful, but as it continued, he began to enjoy the power he had over me. He would warn me all the time that one good hit and I'd be dead. He was twice my size and I didn't stand a chance against him. He was never in a fit of uncontrollable rage. His anger was regulated, systematic, and every hit was precise and methodical, with just the right amount of force to hurt and bruise, but not to kill me. The day after each beating, he was so happy with a smile on his face because he thought he broke my spirit. He would regularly threaten to kill me and would tell me how he would do it. He plotted out how he would make my death look like an accident and how he would get away with it. Sometimes, after my husband beat me, he would tie me up or lock me up in a bedroom and stay and watch me after, so I didn't leave or call for help. He was tracking me on my phone and reading text messages to make sure I did as he said each day. The abuse lasted several months because I didn't know what to do. I had nowhere to go. I had no money or job since I had just been laid off that year. I have no family in the West Coast and only a few friends. I realize now he made sure to separate us and alienate us from family and friends throughout the years. I will never forget the day I escaped. I say escaped because that's what I had to devise an intricate plan to flee without him knowing because of all of his threats to kill me if I left or reported him to the police. Once the kids and I escaped, we were on the run, in hiding. I wanted to get a restraining order against him, but I didn't know how to do it. I called the police, but they were not helpful because they wanted me to report him. I went to the courthouse, but didn't know how to complete the forms myself. I was so discouraged and frightened. My husband would call me all the time, demanding to know where I was and telling me he would find me. I was at my wit's end, desperate, with no money and nowhere to go. After researching online, I finally learned about the Family Justice Center. I went to the South County Family Justice Center and they helped me immediately. The confidential advocates at Community Solutions helped me obtain a restraining order. They put my kids and me up in different hotels. The kids and I went from one hotel to the next hotel in fear for our lives for a month. We were constantly on the road trying to make sure he didn't find us and kill us. Yes, I say kill us, me and the children, because I truly believed he would kill us all. The Community Solutions advocate and the detective stationed at the South County Family Justice Center truly feared for our lives. During the joint safety planning session they did with me, they were able to talk me into filing a police report. They even went with me to my local police station to support me while I gave my statement. Everyone was disgusted with what they heard, but that was only half of the story I shared because there are some things I still cannot speak about. The Santa Clara County District Attorney charged my husband with almost 20 felony counts. It was hard for the police to arrest my husband because his employer would not cooperate with the police. My kids and I continued to live in fear while my husband was free. After some time, he was finally arrested at the airport customs as he was trying to leave the country because his passport was flagged. Sadly, even with the high price of bail, he was able to make bail within a few hours and was back on the streets. He always told me if I ever told the police and he was arrested, he would make bail and then come and get me and kill me. So as soon as I got the call that he was released, I was waking the kids up in the middle of the night and we were on the run again. The story is long, but finally over a year and many court appearances, he took the plea offer and was sentenced to 1 year in county jail. Although my children and I continue to suffer the effects of abuse, we are grateful for the comprehensive support the South County Family Justice Center partners provided us.
Thank you, Ingrid. And this is actually a letter written by one of the clients that was served by the South County Family Justice Center. Again, we did change the name for confidentiality purposes. And in providing support to Emily, the Morgan Hill Police Department was instrumental. Detective Dini was amazing. The DA's office was amazing. And I think that there was, in addition to the advocates, Step Forward Foundation also provides support because there's questions around family law and what custody and things of that matter. But why don't we go through one at a time and share what support you would provide to Emily if she came through the Family Justice Center. And we could start with Ingrid, since usually the advocate is the first person to support survivors.
So when someone like Emily comes into the South County Family Justice Center, first we do assess the survivor's situation, and we connect them with the appropriate FJC partners. At that point, we do offer the survivor, if they are interested in a joint safety plan, and offer our follow-up services.
And in this particular case, because the survivor didn't have any money, didn't have anywhere to go, the hotel support was really, really important. Thank you, Ingrid. And I think the survivor is also connected with victim witness. Mindy, do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of support you would offer Emily?
Yes. So if I was to have met Emily at the Family Justice Center, I would sit down with her, really take my time. I'm pretty sure I would have noticed she's been through a lot, and her coming for support was really a big event for her. So I would take my time with her, thank her for coming, assure her that I would help her in any way that I can, and get into her story and just take our time, learn all the things that she's been through, take breaks if necessary, make sure she has a person of support there, an advocate, or maybe she wants a family member there, but just get her story respected, thank her, and then from there, if there are any injuries present at the time, I would ask for permission to photograph those injuries. I would explain why, and I would say, I'd like permission to photograph your injury so that we can document what the injury is in fact, and then I want you to tell me how that injury happened. It's important to tell the story of how this bruise happened, how this scratch or abrasion or laceration happened, like what was happening. Then I can document the severity of the violence during that incident. And then we go through the history of domestic violence using our domestic violence supplemental form. I'll find out if there are other agencies that ever may have gotten contacted this family because of a disturbance and documented it somewhere. And all of that would help me be able to describe the prevalence of domestic violence, the lethality of domestic violence, everyone who's impacted by it, maybe if there's children in the home, if there's elderly in the home, who identify witnesses, disclosures to anybody else. Also, I find that survivors are really good at documenting their injuries themselves before reporting. And oftentimes that is in their cell phones, photos of old injuries. And that's important to obtain as well, because it shows how long this has been going on. And then in that regard, we can come up with a really good safety plan for that survivor. And then I obviously would write the report, share it with the district attorney's office, and make the next moves to try to apprehend the offender, hold him accountable.
Thank you, Mindy. And two things I want to share with this particular client, with Emily. Ingrid supported her in finally obtaining that restraining order that she'd been trying to obtain for some time, and she felt a lot safer after having that restraining order in place. And Detective Dini from the Morgan Hill Police Department coordinated, because Mindy actually didn't live in South County, but so he coordinated with the police department from where Mindy lived. So that was amazing. We're going to go with Karen next, and then Vishal. Karen, if Emily came to you seeking support, how would you support her in terms of any family law issues that might come up? And how would you support her if Emily was undocumented and perhaps married to a US citizen?
Sure. So I don't practice family law, so my specific knowledge on that topic is limited, but we do have two family law attorneys that would meet with Emily, would explain to her the process. As in this case, typically the really urgent things like the restraining order will go to somebody like Ingrid to be taken care of. And then once there is a court process, that's where my attorneys can come in. And if there's a divorce that needs to be filed, or custody orders, my very limited understanding is that often there are emergency orders that accompany the restraining order, but Ingrid's smiling, so I hope that means that I'm right. So my attorneys can come in and try to make sure that those can become permanent, or at least strengthened, whatever the right terms are. And if the restraining order filing becomes contested, my attorneys can represent Emily in court. Again, since I'm not a family law attorney, I don't want to step too far out of my lane in describing what specifics they provide, but certainly providing legal advice and explaining the options and what the process is going to look like laid out. I think, as many of us know, that the family court process is very rarely, if ever, short and simple. So the attorneys will try to explain that as best they can and provide a roadmap for what they're looking at depending on Emily's specific situation. Also, my understanding is that when there is a criminal case that's open, the family court will wait for that to be resolved. So we're not usually the first line of defense. We usually come in afterwards. As Ingrid was reading, that the perpetrator was sentenced to a year. So once that conviction is in place, the family law attorneys can use that to try to seek these stronger orders and longer orders for either support, custody, divorce, and so on. Since I'm an immigration attorney, that's why Perla was throwing me a bone. So I can talk about something I actually know what I'm talking about, which is in immigration. If I were to meet with Emily, I would certainly be explaining to her the benefits of being a victim of a crime in the United States, and what kind of options that might present her to apply for status. In my experience, my DV survivors, that is their number one fear. Often a lot of the threats involve abusing the legal process, both the immigration process and the family court process, that they will call ICE, have their survivor deported, and then use that as a reason to eliminate parental rights or take permanent custody of the children, because the abuser will not consent to the child crossing an international border to visit mom in the home country. And so they say, you'll never see your kids again, which legally speaking is potentially true if they are able to really manipulate the legal system. So part of my job is explaining the options that are available for that survivor to remain legally in the United States. We see a lot of women who are in status, but in a dependent status on their husbands, and might be in a position where the abuser is saying, well, we're going to get divorced, and when we get divorced, you'll no longer be a dependent, and you'll lose your status and you'll have to be deported, but the children were born here, so only you will go, and the same problem. So I would make sure that we run through all of those options, which is usually very reassuring to the survivor. And I'm often met with surprise, especially in this climate for immigration, that we have these kinds of options that are just there, that they don't have to do anything for them, but that I explain our government just wants to support survivors. We don't want the immigration system to be used as a weapon for abusers, which they do. They use it all the time. So I'd walk through that, and hopefully that would make them feel stable enough to continue on their journey.
Thank you, Karen. Vishal, can you share a little bit with us of what type of support and services you can offer Emily?
Sure. So normally in this process, they've already talked to law enforcement, to Mindy. They've already reported the crime, and it's either at our office to review for charges, or we've already filed a case and the case is in court, and that's why I'm meeting with Emily. So I talked to her about the district attorney's role in the process. We represent the community in the criminal prosecution. I'd make it clear to her that we're not her attorney, that we represent the public in this crime against her. And so our interests are likely going to be joined, but I'd make it very clear that we're not acting as her attorney, and we base all of our decisions on the evidence. We would answer all of her questions about the court process. If she had fear or hesitation about what it would be like to face her abuser in court, we would offer her a court tour where she could come to court and see the courtroom, so that she's not coming in for the first time to face her abuser, and then also having to realize the formalities of the courtroom. We would get her input about sentencing. If we are considering any sort of plea bargain, we would let her know this is what we're planning on offering the defendant to resolve his case without putting her through testifying. We would talk to her about safety considerations and what to expect going forward. So that would be the meeting with Emily. I did want to address a couple of, we're going to answer questions at the end of the process, so rest assured everyone who's asked a question, we'll try to address them all, but there were two in particular in regards to Emily's case. I don't remember the specific case off the top of my head. I don't know if I was involved, but one of the questions was, how is 1 year in jail justice? And I don't disagree based on Emily's letter that is not justice, but some things that we consider as prosecutors are the safety for Emily. And that's a follow-up question to, I think, the second question that the same person asked, which is, how is this person going to be supported when the defendant is released from jail? In most domestic violence crimes, there's options for the judge of probation and 1 year in jail, or 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years in prison. And every one of those crimes is actually cut in half when you consider credits, or every one of those times there's actually cut in half. And so Again, I don't remember the specifics of this particular crime and the specific charges or why the case resolved the way it did, but presumably the maximum time would be 2 actual years in prison, and then there's not a lot of protection for Emily when the defendant gets out. He would be on parole, but the level of supervision that parole gives is very different than the level of supervision that probation gives. And they're one of our partners at FJC. Even though they're not here, they do work hand in hand with all of the partners at FJC. And so to answer the second question that that person asked, when the defendant is released, the probation department will be supervising that person. There's likely a criminal protective order that was issued by the judge for a period of 10 years that he cannot have contact with her in any way at all. And if he did, she could call the police. It would be in their system, and he could end up right back in custody immediately and could be sentenced to the max. Also, sometimes the type of charge is more protective of the victim than the length of time, because we are dealing with limitations on what the judge can do. So the focus sometimes of the district attorney's office in plea bargaining case is to get a strike charge as opposed to maxing the 4 years on someone on a non-strike charge. Again, the purpose for that is to protect Emily and to protect the public from a reoffense from this person. So Ms. Cadillo, I think is who asked that question. I hope I answered all of your questions in regards to the specific case.
Thank you, Vishal. And I'll go through the rest of these slides pretty quickly so that we can get to questions and answers. Just wanted to share with all of you some of the data from the survivors served through the Family Justice Center during fiscal year 1920. We served collectively a total of 502 individuals, and then the duplicate services provided, which include all the services that we're talking about here, the advocacy support, legal services, law enforcement, the district attorney's office was 1,552. And this is a breakdown of the ethnicities. Obviously, in South County, the demographics or Latinos is significantly high, so that's representative here. And then in terms of the victimization type, because we mentioned that the South County Family Justice Center supports survivors of different types of crimes. So the domestic violence survivors are by far the highest number in terms of survivors served. We've also supported labor trafficking survivors, sex trafficking survivors, child sexual abuse survivors, sexual assault survivors, survivors of stalking, and other crimes. And that takes me into the other part of our approach, which is an intersectional approach to gender-based violence. Gender-based violence comes in different forms, and it can generate complex intersections. So it's really important to identify the different types of victimizations that survivors have been exposed to, not only to address the trauma and support, but also to identify what other types of perhaps immigration relief that might be entitled to, social service benefits. And so Community Solutions spearheaded the development of a victim needs screening tool. And in the FJC video, you saw Pauline and an advocate from Aki speaking about the victim needs screening tool. And this is a tool that identifies if survivors were potentially also victimized for sexual assault, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and intimate partner violence. And what we found through the survey, we've conducted, Community Solutions has conducted, this is a regular part of the screening that Community Solutions conducts with open clients. And we looked at 95 surveys, and we found what we always knew, that roughly 40% of survivors of domestic violence are also sexually assaulted by their partners. And the other piece that was really interesting to us is that we found that survivors that were coming in not looking for domestic violence services, and this is not just at the FJC, this is survivors seeking support through Community Solutions. 13% of individuals came into our office seeking support for sexual assault or human trafficking were also domestic violence survivors. 9% of individuals that came in seeking support for domestic violence or human trafficking also identified as sexual assault survivors and were connected to sexual assault advocates. And 5% of the survivors that we work with for domestic violence or sexual assault identified as human trafficking survivors and were connected to an advocate. So that intersectional screening piece is so important. And it also, again, happens organically at the South County Family Justice Center, not just through advocates, but also through our partners. The Step Forward Foundation has been able to identify through their screening for immigration relief several survivors that came in as domestic violence survivors, including the survivor that we spoke about a little bit earlier, but that are also sex trafficking survivors or labor trafficking survivors, sexual assault survivors. So it's really important, again, to identify those different intersections so that we can address all the different forms of gender-based violence, the trauma, but also ensure that survivors are connected to the protections, benefits, and relief that they're entitled to based on the victimization that they've endured. So we are one of three family justice centers. Community Solutions hosts the Family Justice Center in South County every Wednesday. And then Thursdays, Asian Americans for Community Involvement host a Family Justice Center out of their Story Road office. And the YWCA Silicon Valley hosts the Friday Family Justice Center out of their Sunnyvale office. And with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions. I know that there were some questions in the chat, and just any other questions that participants may have.
Well, I can help you with some of the questions, or would you like to open up the questions and facilitate that among your panelists?
Oh, if you want to help us with the questions, that'd be amazing. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. What about survivors who do not want to participate in the criminal justice process? Are they able to use FJC services and remain confidential from the DA and police?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. And one of the things that we're so fortunate about is that we have partners that are so trauma-informed and survivor-centered. And that's why when we launched the Family Justice Center in South County, which South County is the first of the Family Justice Centers of the county to launch, we agreed that this Family Justice Center would be sponsored or hosted out of the Community Solutions office so that survivors can come in and speak with an advocate confidentially. And if it's up to them whether or not they choose to speak to any of our other partners, that's going to be completely up to them. Their information is going to be held confidential. We share aggregate data with our partners, but not any type of individual survivor data unless we have a release. And what we found is that when survivors see the partnerships that we have with the police department, the DA's office, victim witness, Step Forward Foundation, they're a lot more likely to engage in services, and particularly once they actually meet with Vishal or with Mindy, they feel really supported. So yes, the services are confidential and they'll only be linked to another partner if that's what the survivor wishes.
Thank you. Should we refer clients directly to Step Forward, or are the VSU advocate?
So our only intakes for providing legal services are through the Family Justice Center, since it already encompasses 2 days a week. So always somebody can be referred to us directly, and I'm happy to provide that information, but ultimately the survivor is going to be redirected to either come to an FJC or call in on an FJC day, because that's the day that my attorneys are on call for doing a full day of consultations. So that's kind of the yes no answer, but they can get that information directly from us of when and how to call and what that process looks like, but it's going to be the same process either way, since it's 2 days a week.
How many women died last year due to DV?
In Santa Clara County?
Yes.
And actually I think that the death review, every year Santa Clara County death review committee puts together a report of domestic violence related deaths that occurred during the prior year. And I was just looking at the report for this last year. I know that it was significantly less than in years prior, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't know, Vishal, if you do.
I don't have the number handy. I know that there was just an article this week in commemoration of the month that the report came out. But what I do know and what I will say is that statistically, 1 in 5 women nationwide and 1 in 9 men nationwide suffer from intimate partner violence. And that's just a staggering number. it's, you know, there's certain things that all of us do to ensure that it doesn't happen a second time. I'm not sure what we can do as a society to make sure it doesn't even happen the first time. But it's a public safety issue. It's a public health issue. It's an economic issue. It's an educational issue. There's childhood trauma concerned. And, you know, I'm just so thankful to have such professional and competent partners who do get involved to stop it from happening a second time. And I apologize, I don't have the statistics for the homicides for our county.
Actually, Julie just put, so that the death review report is published every year. And Julie just put a link to the last Santa Clara County death review report in the chat box. Thank you, Julie.
No problem. There were 2 deaths last year, 1 male, 1 female. And I just posted the report on our website. It was provided by the James Gibbons Shapiro. So if you're interested in reading that report, please check on the click on the link. And I'm going to turn it over to the manager of the Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention, Carla, to do some of these questions. Carla? All right, let me hop on while she's getting stuff. Let me get to the next question. What do victims think of the length of time it takes to do the strangulation exam? That's a long time, especially if they have kids.
I'm going to let Ingrid respond that because she has the most experience in terms of providing that accompaniment to survivors.
When we discuss the strangulation exam with survivors, we do explain what that process looks like, because we want them to know that it's not going to be something that will be fairly quick. So we do have that conversation with them. The survivor does have the option of undergoing that exam 10 days after he or she was strangled. So this is something that we can also coordinate with the survivor, especially like if they have children, so they can arrange childcare while he or she goes to the hospital to get this exam done. So yes, it is a very lengthy exam, but we try to focus on what good will come out of it, and at least the client, the survivor will know they'll know if they've been medically clear, if there's any damage or there's any follow-up that they may need to if there's any follow-up services with the SART clinic. So yeah, so we do talk to them about the lengthy process, but ultimately it hasn't been a barrier for clients in my experience.
Thank you so much for that. And I apologize, my computer would not unmute, but I'm back, I'm here. And there's a question from Arlene, who would like to know if you are working with organizations of domestic violence, CSEC, and human trafficking, as well as transgender, about national technology policies regarding the harms that are happening to survivors and victims.
So we do work very closely. I can speak to the human trafficking and CSEC. We do work very closely with survivors of human trafficking. Actually, Community Solutions is one of the founding members of the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking, which is a multidisciplinary group that addresses all forms of human trafficking in the South Bay. And we're here in Santa Clara County. We have about 40 members. You can look up our website, South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking. And Step Forward Foundation is also a member. So we have victim service providers, legal service providers, law enforcement, and also a group that looks at community outreach, a legislative subcommittee. So this group comes together to provide direct services and support to survivors, as well as prevention outreach efforts. And that's here again in Santa Clara County, but we work closely with providers across the state and also nationally. So in terms of providing support to survivors that are transgender, that's something that we incorporate into all of our services, and it's something that we continuously are trying to do better, and particularly providing more outreach, and so that survivors know that they can come in and receive services, and develop providing capacity opportunities for service providers, our partners as well. And if anybody else on the panel would like to add.
If not, we can go on to another question. There's a lot of concern about the case study that was used, and one person's concerned about how the victim will be supported after he is released from jail. What if he tries to hurt her and her kids? Can you speak to any kind of follow-up or how you'll be connected with her?
Sure. And so when we talk about the joint safety planning, and that's why that piece is so important, because it's ongoing. And so with Emily, this particular survivor is still connected to services. So she's still receiving any type of peer counseling, safety planning, that type of support. And then as this person is released from jail, we would also bring in our partners like Mindy, Vishal, to do safety planning with her in case there's any other incidents that come up. So there's a restraining order in place. We'd safety plan around what to do if the restraining order is violated. I'll let Mindy talk a little bit about law enforcement's role in providing that additional support.
Yes, so we get notifications of inmate release, and when we have had a high lethality case, we do reconnect with the survivor. She probably already knows that he's been released, but we'll also touch bases and try to assess if she has any concerns at that point. Now, obviously, if she does, I would ensure that the restraining order is in place. If there isn't one, we'll apply for another one. And so she has that protection, so that if there is a violation or an attempt to contact her, law enforcement has some hooks, and we're able to, again, hold him accountable, arrest him, talk to the DA about his repeat offense, and he's still focused on our survivor. So we'll work together in that regard, and then encourage her to report any violations of the order, or maybe any other things that are happening, just to continue to document. Let's say her property is getting damaged, her car is getting damaged. There aren't any witnesses. This person just got released. Can we say it was him? No, but let's keep documentation of what is starting to happen, so that in the event that something else, at least is something bigger, we can see how long this has been growing. And then Vishal and I will talk about the best course of action for this person, the offender.
Yeah, we would also connect her with our partners at the probation department, because they would be free to go into his home. They would be free to contact him at work. They would be free to, if the judge ordered it, to check his phone, to check his location data of his phone. And so that level of supervision that probation provides would also give us another level of security for Emily.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes and a few more questions, so I think we're going to be, it's going to work out. There are many individuals that have witnessed or have been victims and could benefit from behavioral health programs. And this person was curious if there are any programs or policy considering the increase in violence that may or may not have been reported. Are there services for behavioral health, Clara?
So there are several behavioral health service providers. Community Solutions is actually a behavioral health service provider as well, Asian Americans for Community Involvement. The challenge is that in order to connect to behavioral health services, for the most part, individuals have to have Medi-Cal, but there is through the county one hotline where individuals can be referred to be connected to behavioral health services depending on their geographic location, the type of support that they need. The service providers, there's 5 domestic violence service providers in the county: Community Solutions, the YWCA, Next Door, Asian Americans for Community Involvement, MyTree. We also provide support to family members of individuals that are victims of domestic violence, whether that's peer counseling, support with safety planning, resources, and referrals. So that's a way to begin as well, if an individual is looking for that type of support. And then through those organizations, individuals could also be connected to behavioral health service providers that, depending on what the individual needs, can provide additional support.
So I think we have a couple that hopefully will be yes/no questions, but People have heard that the Sunnyvale Justice Center had closed. Is it now open? And is it for walk-ins with survivors even during COVID?
So I think this was stemming from my comment that we still have intakes on Fridays. I can't speak for the YWCA because they're the ones that run that location. And I believe it is correct that they are still physically closed, but Step Forward, because we provide the legal services, we are still taking calls on Fridays to provide the same consultation services that we also provide on Wednesday. In theory for North County, but it's remote anyway. But I believe that is correct that the physical location is still closed. But we're just trying to provide the services on the day as we did before.
Very good. And then the last comment and question. Thank you for doing this work. It's amazing to hear about the collaboration in an effort to comprehensively address family violence and to break the cycle of perpetrator committing violence. Are there efforts to coordinate the batterer intervention programs and other agencies like maybe reentry that serve defendants?
So in regards to collaborating with the services that are ordered to address the offender's actions, there's legal limitations on why the district attorney's office could not be involved with that. They have a lawyer, they still have a Fifth Amendment right even after they've been convicted of the crime because they have an appellate period. And so there's legal limitations on why the district attorney's office couldn't be involved in that. I'll answer for Step Forward, for Community Solutions, there's also kind of an internal conflict, right? If in regards to dealing with the offender from an organization that's assisting the survivors. So probation, on the other hand, though, is able to service both ends of the criminal case. They assist the survivors, and then they also are in charge of ensuring that the offender is doing all of the court-mandated classes.
Well, the other piece that's super exciting, and I don't know if Julie or Carla want to talk a little bit about this, but our county was selected as one of the 5 counties across the state to participate in the AB 372 pilot. And this is an opportunity, I don't know, Julie or Carla, if you want to say anything about it, or if you want me to.
I can really quickly just say, so we're one of, I think it's 5 or 6 counties that are reimagining and experimenting with what batterer intervention programming can look like. So we're taking this very seriously. We have a controlled study group that is using an evidence-based curriculum. We have facilitators that will be doing that in groups with men and women in English and in Spanish. And we have, really important to us, have also provided survivor services for the partners of the batterer, and we have an outside evaluator who will be studying this so that hopefully we can really inform the state on what's working and what's not with batterer intervention programming. So it's a multi-year study. The training's happening right now and the classes should begin next month. Thank you for that.
I think we're out of time now. We're getting some comments thanking you all for sharing your collaborative efforts and for working together and really being a model for the state on collaborative efforts when addressing gender-based violence. As a reminder to participants, we'll have, actually the PowerPoint is already on the website. If you go back to the page where you registered and the link was provided in the chat, you'll find the PowerPoint there, and Perla has the contact information from the partners in this endeavor on that PowerPoint too. Thank you all so much. You did a super job and really appreciative for all of your work.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, amazing FJC partners.
Thank you.